All my success is from protecting those moments from happening, right? So I say I never want to create permanent undesirable results based on temporary feelings.
Out of the 3 pillars you said of your business, the mindset, the customer service, and then the email.
Customer journey and then relationships, yep.
Which one would you say is the one that you enjoy the most? All right,
mindset.
I knew that. So in mindset, one thing that you actually shared when John asked the question in terms of like how you correlated it, you went straight to philosophy, and that's Jim Rohn's thing with the foundation of the philosophies where everything changes. How did you get to that point where you have a full understanding of this?
Oh, I don't have a full understanding. I'm like 1% of the way,
where
bro.
You're at.
What a great question. And I want to say something. My favorite thing is mindset. The most powerful thing is relationships.
Yeah.
Right? Because like in my relationship bucket, the thing that I'm bullish on is the relationship with yourself, right? Like that is the thing that I obsess over in teaching, is like this integrous relationship with yourself, which is where in application, the rubber meets the road more than anything. But like I'm obsessed with like how my brain works because of all the trauma I've experienced. And I think I'm like a fucking science experiment that somebody should make a movie about. And so like I'm obsessed because I feel like I live inside of like multiple movies, like that Split Personality movie in like a straitjacket, and like I'm allowed to talk to the public.
Yeah.
And like there's 8 million things going on for what I share with you. So like I obsess about mindset, right? So I'm so annoyed because I sound like such a fucking broken record, and I understand the most effective and valuable things are the simple, repeatable things. But the true piece that made me see it and understand it was my willingness to sit with my stillness practice to allow myself the space to see it, right? So the way that I look at this is this philosophy piece or these levels piece, right? Like for me, most of my career, most of my life was I would be really emotional triggered and I would respond, right? I'd immediately go into the opposite behavior, right? And then the next level of that growth was being triggered and not going into the behavior, right? And then the next part was like, okay, what is this thing, right? And there's all these like levels of like unhealing trauma, right? Or these levels. And so to get to being triggered in like one of the hardest situations in your life and being able to immediately go to philosophy, you have to read the first 9 Harry Potter books first. And so there's no like skipping the line, right? So the process is there. It's the more that you choose to lean into it, the faster you understand the mindset piece, right? And so if your frame, right, and it depends on your teaching frame, right? But if everybody listening or you're in agreement that the best place for you to be is in conscious awareness to then choose your next behavior, like pick your path to get there, whether it's spirituality, consciousness, and fucking breath work, I don't care. Yeah. The moment you recognize that like you have control and ability to make decisions, right, you win. So if you use the Eisenhower matrix, which is unconsciously incompetent, consciously incompetent, unconsciously competent, and consciously competent, that's basically the levels of what this is. So in the very beginning, when you're triggered and you're reacting, you are unconsciously incompetent. You don't know what's happening, right? The moment you start recognizing like, oh my God, I'm totally triggered and reacting right now, you become consciously incompetent because you have an awareness of it, but you haven't changed the behavior. But in that point, you choose a new behavior. Once you choose a new behavior, you become consciously incompetent because it's messy as fuck, right? And you're going to lose more than you win. And then when it becomes integrated, you become consciously competent, which is when you start to see it. So for example, if you think about some of the things that you guys handle in business right now, right? Like if you have agents you talk to, or even as business partnerships, when you guys have a disagreement, now you can probably have a disagreement and instantly be like, oh yeah, it's this. And you're like, yeah, totally fine. But the first time 3 years ago, probably felt like your whole life was going to end. You're like, I don't want to have this conversation. I don't know what's there. Yeah. You couldn't even see it because you didn't have an awareness. So you had to go through the phases. But now that you've practiced it, when you have a disagreement, your default is, oh, I'll just talk about it, right? And so you only get the awareness when you actually get the awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. There's no studying. There's no reading. Right. So the way that I look at it, it's like, oh, if you want a 6-pack, great. Look in the mirror when you're done with your training program because it's not going to magically appear when you stare at it. Right.
Yeah.
And so this thing that I'm so bullish on is this like awareness piece. It's this pause piece. It's the wedge, right? Like that's all it is. And you pick your teaching, right? When I did my combat lifesaver course, when we're in the military and we're doing trauma, like real trauma work, we have to do it on live species to do this, but they intentionally trick you. They will blow off the leg of something, but then also block its airway so you can't see it, hoping that when you come up, you're so overwhelmed with the blood and the gore and you try to put a tourniquet on that they die because they can't breathe because you didn't follow priority and you didn't triage the situation.
Yeah.
Right. So they put these traps in because it's so easy to see that. But any trained paramedic that knows that situation knows the first thing to do is to pause, to check for breathing, to assess the situation. Right. We don't do that as entrepreneurs. We just tend to go straight for the wound. And so whatever that is for you, there's this model I teach on my podcast in my model. I call it my SOS model, right? And so basically it's the inner tools, the inner circle, and the outer tools. The inner tools is the most important part. This is anything that you can do that pattern interrupts you out of your current state, right? So if you're sitting at your laptop and your best fucking client just fired you and you're losing $100,000, I promise you nothing you touch with those fingers is going to help your business. I promise. Like you should basically get removed from the game room, right? So we know that, right? But what ends up happening is we don't have a way to get out of it. So we stay stuck in it, or we ruminate, or we look for evidence, right? But if I was like, if you had that, John, and I was like, all right, cool, go for a 20-minute run, would you come back as emotional or on tilt as you did when you left? There's no way.
No.
It's fucking impossible, right? And so the inner tools is anything you have at your disposal to pattern interrupt. So breath work, dancing, music, walking, working out, playing with your kids, throwing a ball, doing pull-ups, like anything that's out of your current bucket. The goal is when you recognize that you have no emotional control, you don't try to, you go to your plan to regain presence.
Yeah.
And so the inner tools is anything you have at your disposal that you can get to within a minute or 5 minutes that you can do for 10 to 15 minutes that will reset you, right? Breath, walking, stillness, you name it. Everybody has their own. Shooting guns, right? Like I open my back door and I shoot my sniper rifle 1,000 yards and I feel better every fucking time. It works like a charm, right? Yeah. But all I'm doing is I'm just looking for the pattern interrupt that gets me out of the emotion or out of the pill bottle into perspective. That's it, right? So if the inner circle doesn't work, what I do is I set a 15-minute timer, and I have 15 minutes to go through my inner circle, right? Breath, stillness. If at 15 minutes it doesn't work, I go to my inner circle. My inner circle are the top, up to the top 9 people in my life that hold me accountable to my potential but don't believe my story. Hold me accountable to my potential that don't believe my story. So, you know, on your iPhone, in your messages, you have your top 9.
Yep.
Who do you think my top 9 are?
Your inner circle.
My inner circle. When you open the notes on my phone, the pinned note is my SOS procedures so that if I'm ever triggered, I don't have to think about it. And then if you look at the background of my phone, one is a picture of my kids and the second one is a picture of my wife the day I met her. And so even my phone, when I'm triggered and in tilt, the first thing I see is my 2 kids. The second thing I see when I unlock it is my wife. And if I'm in tilt, all I do is open the notes and I know exactly what to do. So the inner circle is the 9 people that hold me accountable. So I brief them. I'm like, hey, you're in my inner circle. So if I'm ever stuck, I'm going to reach out. I'm just going to say inner circle and you'll know what I'm talking about. And then at that 15-minute mark, I'll reach out. I've never made it past my inner circle for more than 5 minutes without them checking me on my bullshit or giving me clarity. Because I'm like, hey, I'm stuck here. I don't have this. And I remember one specific example. I got hit with a copyright infringement lawsuit in my backpack company. And I got the email from my attorney. And it was expensive. And I was like, my business partner's going to lose his farmhouse, his wife. We just bought the car. Like I was on fucking full tilt for like 36 hours, right? I didn't change my calendar. I took 2 business calls, both $100,000 intensives. Those are the first 2 deals I never closed. And I was on tilt, so I lost both those deals. The next day, I was still on tilt. I couldn't figure it out. And so I called my wife. And my wife's like, have you called your attorney? And I'm like, no. And so she hung up on me, and I called my attorney. And he picked up the phone and he's like, are you calling me about that stupid copyright thing? Like, yeah. He's like, I handled it yesterday. You don't have to pay anything. Wow. And I was like, fuck off. And it hurt, man.
But we all do that though. You
it does. But and I say it now because in hindsight, the reason I built models around myself is so it can't happen anymore. Yeah. Because all my success is from protecting those moments from happening, right? So I say I never want to create permanent undesirable results based on temporary feelings.
Yeah.
Right. That's and so when I really, really think about that, now I know it's really easy for me to see when I'm triggered, right? Because I'm like, oh my God, I'm emotional. Great. I go to my inner tools. If that doesn't work, I go to my inner circle. And if that doesn't work, my outer circle is a series of experts or skills that might be needed. So my attorney, my copyright person, that agency, whoever. And typically my inner circle directs me on who to call to my outer circle. Lindsay's like, call your attorney. I'm like, oh fuck, I should have put him in the outer circle, right? And so then I know even on my worst days, if I get hit with the biggest atomic bomb, I'm 25 minutes max away from being able to get back into action.
Yeah, that's golden.
Right. And that's where that consistency comes in, because I recognize that if I let that emotion get in the way of those 3 behaviors that I do every day, I'm going to let that temporary feeling create permanent undesirable results that I won't catch for 90 days until it's too late.
That's great.
Because those are the core functions of the business.
George, let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of a company or a system called BioCybernaut?
I have.
So I did BioCybernaut. Have you done it?
I haven't, no.
Okay. So BioCybernaut is alpha brainwave training classes. And essentially they put you in an alpha brain state. And the philosophy behind it is that you could solve any problem. I went to a Tony Robbins event, Unleash the Power Within. I'm probably saying this wrong. Unleash the Power Within, right?
Yeah.
UPW.
Yeah, UPW.
Yep. And then in the event, he was talking about, if you want to level up, go do this BioCybernaut with Dr. George, whatever his name was.
Yep.
I'm like,
Yep.
I'm going to do it. So then I signed up right away for it. It was $15,000 at the time. And I was just like, that's a lot of money. I went there.
Well, tell them how old you were.
I was like 21, 22.
Good job, man.
Yeah, I was ballsy. And then they put me in this little cave of a room. It was all purple and they had like soundproofing things and they had these audio speakers all around your head. And each part of the electrons were connected to a part of your brain. And every time you'd hit an alpha brainwave, it would release music. So if I cut you, your brain gives feedback to send white blood cells to repair it, but your brain doesn't give it to yourself. The first 3 days, it was like therapy almost. And they would just sit you in there. You're in there for 12 plus hours and you don't know what the hell's going on. And then after that, you start tripping and seeing your own self as a warrior self in front of you, going back in time, resolving all the traumas that they uncovered in the first 3 days. And that's almost everything you're talking about is so relative to that, which is insane.
And I want to say this about their strategies and tactics. I have a lot of them. And for realtors, the reason I was so bullish on what I said on that podcast is because if they don't get that piece, the strategies and tactics are ineffective. Like they actually create more damage.
Yeah.
Right. Because they end up using them with this attachment to like an agenda, right? Of like, oh, this will get the close, this will get the thing. And if I can't just challenge the thought first, it ends up killing them. And every time they get this, it's huge. And so when I stack, like typically when I talk to realtors, I teach them the 3 biggest mistakes that people make with customer journey and then the 5 required steps for every one, because I can teach it through text or phone or in-person relationship. And every time they take them, it's fucking bananas. And it's just literally 8 teaching points. 3 mistakes and 5 required steps.
Now I feel like I want to know all of it. So you said that you in the middle you were saying
that's called that's called the Zygarnik effect as well. And I did that on purpose because now you're going to push harder to have me back and I won't have to schedule it. So that's me leading you into getting what I want.
Yes.